Hidden brushed her cushy fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune as Celeste Rivera pushed her cart through the marble corridors of the Meridian Gallery. It was 2:47 a.m., and the prestigious space was hers alone, just the way she preferred it. The silence allowed her to truly see the art that surrounded her. Pieces worth more than she'd earn in several lifetimes. Celeste paused before a Monet, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. Even in the harsh overhead lighting, the water lilies seemed to shimmer with life. She'd studied every brushstroke during her late-night shifts, memorizing the way the master had captured light dancing on water. These stolen moments of communion with genius were what made the exhaustion bearable. At 32, Celeste had been cleaning the Meridian for 3 years. By day, she worked at a coffee shop in Queens, and on weekends she painted in her cramped studio apartment. Her canvases were stacked against every wall, a rainbow of dreams that no one else had ever seen. Gallery submissions had yielded nothing but form rejection letters. An art school remained a distant fantasy she couldn't afford. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, the gallery was preparing for tomorrow's exclusive showing of Emerging Voices, a collection featuring 5 up-and-coming artists whose careers were about to launch into the stratosphere. Celeste had watched the installation process. Had seen the careful placement of each piece, the precise lighting adjustments, the reverent handling of work created by artists not much older than herself. Hidden in her supply closet was a canvas. She'd completed last month a piece she'd titled Solitude's Garden. It depicted a woman tending to flowers that grew from broken concrete, their petals catching light that seemed to emanate from within. The painting was raw, honest, born from her own experience of finding beauty in unexpected places. It was also, she believed, the best work she'd ever created. Her hands trembled as she retrieved the canvas from behind the industrial cleaning supplies. The familiar weight of it felt different now, heavier with possibility and terror. The exhibition space had one empty wall, a small alcove that the curator had deemed awkward for the featured pieces. It was perfect for what Celeste had in mind, moving like a ghost through the gallery. She positioned the painting with the same care she'd seen the professional installers use. The morning crew would arrive in 5 hours. By then, her piece would be hanging among works that had been selected through proper channels, validated by committees and critics. Celeste stepped back, her heart hammering against her ribs. Under the gallery's sophisticated lighting system, Solitude's Garden came alive in ways her apartment's single lamp had never revealed. The colors seemed richer, the emotion more palpable. For the first time, she could see her work as others might not, as the desperate creation of a struggling artist, but as something worthy of attention. She knew the risks. Discovery could mean losing her job, facing charges for vandalism, becoming a cautionary tale whispered about in art circles. But as she looked at her painting hanging in the space where she dreamed it might belong, Celeste felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope tomorrow, important people would walk through these halls. Critics, collectors, artists who'd already made their mark on the world. Another might pause before her work, might feel what she'd poured into every brushstroke. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. With one last look at her secret contribution to the exhibition, Celeste returned to her cart and continued her rounds, cleaning the very gallery that now knowingly displayed her soul on its walls. The collectors at Theodore Blackwood stepped out of his midnight blue Bentley, his polished Oxford shoes clicking against the sidewalk with mechanical precision. At 58, he moved through the world with the calculated grace of a man who had spent decades acquiring everything he desired, except the one thing that continued to elude him. A piece of art that could still surprise him. The Meridian Gallery's director, Victoria Sterling, waited by the entrance, her smile as perfectly curated as the exhibitions she oversaw. "Mr. Blackwood, welcome. I trust you'll find tonight's preview illuminating." Theodore merely nodded, had little patience for small talk, especially when it came to art. His collection, housed in a climate-controlled wing of his Manhattan penthouse, contained works that museums coveted. Picasso's hung beside Pollock's. Van Gogh's shared wall space with contemporary masters. Yet lately, he felt nothing when he looked at them, no spark, no connection, just the cold satisfaction of ownership. the Emerging Voices exhibition represents. Our most promising finds, Victoria continued as they entered the pristine white space. Each artist has been carefully vetted. Their potential for market appreciation is quite promising. Theodore's jaw tightened. Market appreciation. When had art become solely about investment returns? Remember being 17, standing before his first Rothko in a small Boston gallery, feeling as though the painting was speaking directly to his soul. That moment had shaped everything his passion for collecting. His understanding that true art transcended monetary value. They moved through the exhibition methodically. Victoria provided background on each piece, rattling off impressive credentials. In favorable reviews. The work was competent, safe, designed to appeal to collectors who bought art like stock portfolios. Theodore's expression remained impassive, his interest waning with each passing minute. "I think we've seen enough," he said. Turning toward the exit, that's when he saw it, tucked away in a small alcove. Almost hidden from the main thoroughfare, hung a painting that stopped him mid-stride. A woman tended to flowers growing from cracked concrete, her face illuminated by an otherworldly light that seemed to emanate from the blooms themselves. The technique was masterful but raw, emotional in a way that bypassed intellect and struck directly at something deeper. Theodore approached slowly, his breath catching. The painting pulsed with life, with struggle, with an honesty that the other pieces lacked. You could see the artist's pain in every brushstroke, but also their hope. Their refusal to surrender to circumstances that threatened to crush beauty before it could bloom. "Tell me about this one," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Victoria appeared beside him, confusion flickering across her perfectly composed features. I'm not entirely certain. It wasn't in my notes for tonight's tour. Who painted it?" Theodore's eyes never left the canvas. "I'll need to check with my staff. The piece might have been misplaced during installation." But Theodore was no longer listening. For the first time in years, he felt that familiar electricity, that sense of discovering something that mattered. The painting before him wasn't trying to impress or invest wisely. It simply existed, authentic and vulnerable and utterly compelling. "I want to meet the artist," he said firmly. "Tonight?" Victoria's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm not sure that's possible. Let me make some inquiries. Find them." His tone brooked no argument. "I don't care what it takes." Unveiled truth. Victoria Sterling's heels echoed through the empty gallery as she paced behind her office door. Phone pressed to her ear with white-knuckled intensity. In 20 years of running the Meridian, she had never faced a crisis quite like this. Theodore Blackwood, arguably the most influential private collector in North America, was demanding to meet an artist who, according to her records, didn't exist. "James, I need you here immediately," she hissed into the phone, speaking to her head of security. "We have a situation." Her mind raced through possibilities. Had a piece been stolen from storage and rehung? Was this some elaborate prank by a disgruntled artist seeking attention? The painting's quality was undeniable, but its presence was impossible to explain through official channels. James arrived within minutes, his usually calm demeanor reflecting Victoria's own barely contained panic. "The security footage from last night," she demanded. "I need every angle of the exhibition space." They huddled around her computer screen, fast-forwarding through hours of empty corridors. Victoria's stomach dropped as the timestamp showed 3:15 a.m. and a figure appeared in the frame, small, deliberate, moving with intimate knowledge of the space. "Stop," Victoria whispered. "Zoom in." The image pixelated as James adjusted the focus, but the uniform was unmistakable. Dark blue maintenance coveralls, the Meridian's cleaning service logo visible on the back. The figure carefully positioned a canvas, stepped back to examine the placement, then disappeared from view. "It's one of the cleaning staff," James said. Unnecessarily. Victoria's carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. The woman responsible for creating the piece that had captivated Theodore Blackwood, the painting that radiated with more raw talent than half the artists in her stable, was someone who emptied trash cans and mopped floors in her gallery. "Me the night shift roster," Victoria commanded. her voice tight with a mixture of disbelief and something she didn't want to acknowledge as admiration. Within minutes, she had the information. Celeste Rivera, employed by Elite Cleaning Services. For 3 years, exemplary record, no prior incidents. Victoria studied the employee photo, a woman with tired but intelligent eyes. Paint stains barely visible under her fingernails that she'd clearly tried to scrub away. The revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow. How many nights had this? Woman worked among the masterpieces, absorbing techniques and inspiration, while Victoria remained oblivious to the artist in her midst. How had someone with such obvious talent remained invisible, relegated to after-hours maintenance? But beneath her shock lay a more troubling realization. Theodore Blackwood was still waiting, and the reputation of her gallery hung in the balance. If word spread that the Meridian couldn't control its own exhibitions, that unauthorized work was being hung by custodial staff, her credibility would be destroyed. The art world thrived on exclusivity, on the careful curation of talent through proper channels. Yet as Victoria stared at the security footage, watching Celeste step back to admire her work with the reverence of someone who truly understood art's power, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, genuine awe at an artist's courage. Her phone buzzed. A text from Theodore. Status update needed. Victoria's hands trembled as she typed her response. Artist located. Preparing introduction. She found Celeste in the basement supply room, quietly organizing cleaning supplies before her shift ended. The woman looked up with the startled expression of someone unused to being noticed. "Ms. Rivera," Victoria said, her voice softer than she'd intended. "We need to talk." Celeste's face went pale, but she didn't deny anything. Instead, she straightened her shoulders with a dignity that Victoria found unexpectedly moving. "I know why you're here," Celeste said quietly. "I'm ready to face whatever consequences." "There's someone upstairs who wants to meet you," Victoria interrupted. "Someone who believes your painting is extraordinary." For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Victoria did something that surprised. Them both, she smiled. "Celeste, I think it's time the art world met you properly." Unlikely patron Marcus Chen adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses as he studied the photograph on his tablet. Comparing it to the woman sitting across from him in the gallery's conference room, 3 days had passed since Theodore Blackwood's dramatic discovery, and Marcus had spent every waking hour investigating Celeste Rivera's background. What he'd found had only deepened his employer's fascination. "Your technique shows classical training," Marcus said, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone who had spent 15 years evaluating artistic potential. "Yet you've never attended formal art school." Celeste shifted uncomfortably in the leather chair, still wearing her coffee shop uniform from her morning shift. "I've studied books, watched online tutorials, the gallery, ... Working here at night, I could observe the masters up close." Marcus nodded, making notes on his tablet. As Theodore's primary art advisor, he had developed an eye for authenticity. That had saved his employer from countless fraudulent pieces and overvalued investments. But Celeste Rivera presented a different kind of challenge, raw talent that had developed in isolation, unfiltered by academic convention or market pressures. "I visited your apartment yesterday," Marcus continued, watching her reaction carefully. "Your landlord was cooperative when I mentioned potential compensation for access." Celeste's eyes flashed with embarrassment and anger. "You had no right, I." "Had every right," Marcus interrupted gently. "Mr. Blackwood doesn't make investment decisions lightly. I counted 47 completed canvases in your studio. The progression of skill over just the past 2 years is remarkable." He swiped through images on his tablet, showing her photographs of her own work. Celeste stared at the screen, seeing her cramped apartment transformed into a makeshift gallery through Marcus's professional documentation. "This early piece," Marcus said, stopping at a painting of a subway platform. "Technically competent, but emotionally restrained. Compare it to your recent work, the vulnerability, the willingness to expose your truth. Most artists spend decades learning to access that level of honesty." Despite her discomfort with his invasion of her privacy, Celeste found herself leaning forward. No one had ever analyzed her work with such depth, such understanding of her artistic evolution. "Mr. Blackwood wants to offer you representation," Marcus said, setting down the tablet. Full backing for a solo exhibition, introduction to major collectors, a monthly stipend that would allow you to focus entirely on your art. The words hung in the air like a foreign language Celeste couldn't quite translate. I don't understand. Why would he? Because your painting moved him, Marcus said simply. In 30 years of collecting, I've seen Theodore react to art with intellectual appreciation, with market savvy, with social positioning in mind. But I've never seen him stand before a piece for 20 minutes in complete silence, tears in his eyes. Celeste felt her breath catch. Tears. Marcus nodded. Your Solitude's Garden spoke to something in him that million-dollar masterpieces couldn't reach. That's not something you can manufacture or teach. It's a gift. But even as hope bloomed in her chest, Celeste felt the familiar weight of doubt. What's the catch? People like me don't get opportunities like this? Catch, Marcus said, his expression growing serious, is that Theodore can be demanding. He'll expect complete dedication to your craft. No more coffee shop shifts, no more cleaning jobs. Your art becomes your life, your obsession. Some artists thrive under that pressure. Others crumble. He leaned back in his chair, studying her face. There's also the question of authenticity. Your work's power comes from your struggle, your outsider perspective. Success changes people. It changes their art. We're offering you everything you've dreamed of, but dreams have a way of transforming once they become reality. Celeste stared out the conference room window at the city beyond. The same view she'd admired countless times while mopping these floors. The offer represented escape from financial worry, validation of her talent, entry into a world she'd only observed from the margins. I need time to think, she said quietly. Marcus smiled, the first genuinely warm expression he'd shown during their meeting. Theodore said you'd say that. It's why he believes you're worth the investment. A desperate artist would have said yes immediately. A true artist considers what acceptance might cost. He stood, gathering his materials. You have until tomorrow evening, but Celeste, don't let fear of change eclipse the possibility of becoming who you're meant to be. New beginnings 6 months later. Celeste Rivera stood before the entrance of the Meridian Gallery, but this time, she wasn't carrying a mop bucket. Tonight, she wore a simple black dress that Victoria had helped her choose, her paint-stained hands. Now manicured, but still bearing the permanent marks of her craft. The banner above the entrance read Celeste Rivera, emerging from shadow and elegant gold lettering. Through the glass doors, she could see the crowd gathering for her opening art critics, collectors and journalists who had come to witness what the papers were calling the most remarkable discovery in contemporary art. Her work filled the same wall she had once cleaned, illuminated by the same lights that had revealed her secret painting that night 6 months ago. The transformation hadn't been easy. Theodore's patronage had indeed changed everything. Her circumstances, her daily routine, her relationship with her own art. The financial security allowed her to paint without desperation. But Marcus had been right about success altering perspective. Some mornings, she struggled to access the raw emotion that had fueled her earlier work. Ready? Victoria appeared beside her, radiant with the satisfaction of someone who had backed the right horse. The gallery director had become an unexpected ally, helping Celeste navigate the bewildering world of art politics and social expectations. Celeste nodded, though her stomach churned with familiar anxiety. What if they don't understand what the work means? They will, Victoria assured her. And if they don't, it won't matter. Your art speaks for itself. As they entered the gallery, Celeste was struck by the surreal nature of the moment. 6 months ago, she had been invisible in this space, a shadow moving through after our silence. Now she was the center of attention, the subject of animated conversations and appraising stares. Theodore stood near Solitude's Garden, the painting that had started everything. It held the place of honor in the exhibition, spotlit like a jewel. He caught her eye and nodded with quiet approval. Their relationship had evolved beyond patron and artist into something resembling mutual respect. He pushed her to dig deeper, to risk more in her work, while she reminded him why art mattered beyond market value, Ms. Rivera. A journalist approached. With a recorder, can you tell us about your journey from janitor to celebrated artist? The question she'd been dreading? Celeste had worried that her background would become a novelty, overshadowing the work itself. But as she looked around the gallery at visitors genuinely moved by her paintings, at collectors studying her technique with serious appreciation, she realized her story was part of her art's power. I was never just a janitor, she said quietly. I was always an artist. I just needed someone to see me. Marcus appeared at her elbow, steering her toward a group of museum curators who were discussing acquisition. The business side of art still felt foreign to her, but she was learning to navigate it without losing herself in the process. As the evening progressed, Celeste found herself standing before her newest piece of painting, of a woman removing a cleaning uniform to reveal artist's clothes beneath. The metaphor was obvious, perhaps, but the execution was masterful. The figure's face showed not triumph but contemplation, acknowledging that transformation always involves loss as well. Gain. An elderly woman approached, studying the painting with intense focus. This one understands something important, she said to her companion. Success doesn't erase. Struggle it transforms it into something else entirely. Celeste smiled, feeling seen in a way that had nothing to do with recognition or sales figures. The woman's words captured what she'd been trying to express in her recent work. That becoming visible didn't mean forgetting where she'd come from. Later, as the crowd began to thin, Celeste found herself alone with Solitude's garden. The painting that had changed everything looked different now, surrounded by her other work. It was no longer an isolated cry for recognition, but the first note in a larger symphony. She thought about that night 6 months ago, when fear and hope had guided her hands as she hung her secret painting. The janitor who had made that desperate gamble still lived within her, but she was no longer defined by invisibility. She had learned that being seen meant more than being noticed. It meant being understood, valued, and allowed to grow. The gallery lights dimmed around her as the evening ended, but this time, Celeste Rivera wasn't staying too clean. She was leaving as the artist she had always been, finally free to create in the light.